Would you like to learn counted cross stitch? I've cross stitched for years. It's super easy. In this video, I will show you how to get started, plus give you a couple tips and tricks that beginners and experienced stitchers will find helpful. Hi, I'm Lisa, and I'm from thetiltedthread.com. I love what I do. I've helped crafting students discover their natural skills and abilities to reach results they never dreamed were possible. I can help you get started on your very own path to success. Let's start now. I've got a little counted cross stitch kit here. As you may have suspected, I love anything with quilt blocks. This little hanging kit is a great counted cross stitch beginner project. For a newbie, you should keep the image of the completed project handy. Most kits include this image, the cloth, a needle, the thread, and the pattern. The pattern itself will have the design, the legend for both the cross stitches and the outline stitches, and in this case they have the thread bundled so it has a list that tells the thread colors in each bundle. Aida cloth is typically referred to by the count. The count is the number of squares per inch. So for example, 11 count would be 11 squares per inch, 18 count would be 18 squares per inch, and so on. If you're unsure which count of fabric you have, you can use your cross-stitch ruler to quickly determine it. Line up your fabric holes with the indicator lines. This fabric is 14 count. To begin your project, you'll need to locate the center of the pattern and the center of the fabric. Most patterns have the center line marked with arrows, like you see here. Following the center line mark at the top and the center line mark on the left side, I can easily determine which stitch is my center stitch. To find the center of the fabric, simply fold it in half and half again. I usually give it a little pinch at the center point so that when I open it, I can see it better. According to this pattern, I'm going to be starting with dark green. Floss comes in 6 strands. In most cases, I use 2 strands of floss for counted cross stitching. If the fabric count is very high, say 24 or 32, then I would typically use only 1 strand. If the count is very low, say 11, then I may use as many as 3 strands. Separating floss strands is easy, but sometimes if done incorrectly, you can get your floss in a knot. This method prevents that from happening. I'm using a length of floss that is about 18 inches. That's a good length to use, as much longer and you'll find problems with tangling. Flare out your floss strands and grab only 1. Holding the other 5 slightly snugly, pull only the single strand of floss from the others. It will bunch up behind your fingers, but once the single thread is removed, it will uncoil without knotting. This little gadget is my favorite needle threader. It has 2 sizes, so you can use it for floss or even cotton. I've included a link to this and other materials I used in this video in the description. Since I'm using 2 strands of thread, I'm going to fold my thread end to end. Insert the threader into the needle, resting it in the depression, and then laying my thread over the hook. Now all you need to do is pull. Cross stitches are made by starting in the lower left-hand corner from the bottom of the fabric, then crossing to the upper right-hand corner on the top of the fabric, back down to the bottom. You complete this half stitch along your row as your pattern dictates. Then make the return pass by completing the actual cross. With a threaded needle, I come up in the bottom left of the starting square, leaving an inch or so on the back. Then go down in the top right of the starting square to form my first half cross stitch. Flip the fabric over and I will send the needle through the loop. This makes an amazing, knot-free beginning to any counted cross stitch thread. Referring back to the pattern, I see that I need to make my stitches going upwards in a single row for a total of 14. This is the point that I need to give my stitching a little thought. I've been commissioned a few times to make display pieces for a cross-stitch store. It's important, particularly in that case, that the back of your stitching be neat. It's also important that I can stitch quickly. So I'm thinking about where I'm starting, where I need to go. Will I have to start and stop threads? Do I need to carry my thread? And what my path will be. Don't worry, these answers will all come with experience. I am confident that I can easily go up and down with 14 stitches and have some thread left over to go to either side. So that's my plan. Starting at the square above my center square, I come up from the bottom left, traveling to the top right. As a time saver, I don't technically go to the bottom. Instead, I do my stitching on the top, coming in and out with my needle in the desired positions and then pulling my thread. Here's an important note. You only want the thread to be snug, not tight. If it's tight, you squish your square and that won't have even-sized stitches when you make your cross. I'm going to continue along until I get to 14. Once in a while, you'll need to unspin your thread. I let the needle fall loose and towards the fabric and the floss uncurls. This is perfectly normal. I'm giving my stitches a double count just to see where I'm at with the project. Once I reach 14, I then begin my return pass, making my half cross stitches whole cross stitches. I use the same needle technique. Now that my half stitches are whole stitches, I still have thread left. Checking my pattern, I see that I can go either way for quite a while. I'm thinking that I can easily run this thread out. Going towards the right, I just finished my thread in what would now be considered my bottom left, so I need to start it from the top right. This is only necessary for that stitch, so I continue on in my bottom left for the rest of the thread. I'd like to mention here that I typically don't use hoops for cross stitching. Because the fabric is such an even weave, I don't find it necessary. Plus, I'm not a fan of hooping and unhooping, or the marks that are sometimes left in the project from the hoop. Notice that I turn my fabric a little so that the needle movement is comfortable to me. Now it's time to end my thread. With cross stitch, you don't want to make knots, so I'm going to run my thread under 4 to 5 stitches to secure it. I'm being careful to pick up only the stitch threads and not any of the fabric. You'll see the stitching on the back side is just as neat as the stitching on the front. One final note. Beginners may find it difficult to get their tension correct with the time-saving technique that I showed. So make a few stitches going up through the fabric, snugging down the thread, down through the fabric, snugging the thread, just to develop the feel of it. Then give my technique a try.